Hey, so your vintage Graflex is finally finished, and I kind of want to do a quick little demo on the install itself as well as the metal crystal chamber chassis inside the hilt. So here's your vintage Graflex. It's been set up with the Graflex Shop A&H kit with the 7 grips, the bubble strip, got the red button here, as well as the shine through glass eye. In the emitter we have our spring-loaded KR Sabers blade plug. So this mimics the spring-loaded mechanism inside the actual Graflex flash. Down here we have the 4 rivets, so the 2 small ones here and 2 large ones here. So those are actually accurate to what they found on some of the newer prop references for the A&H saber. Down here we have her D-ring installed with the 2 vented rivets. So you may notice it's actually not completely aligned, but that's because the actual D-ring itself is a little bit lopsided actually, which is actually accurate, but One On actually has a newer, more accurate version of it. So you'll notice here that there's actually a smaller gap there compared to over there. To access the internals for your Graflex, you want to unlatch your clamp. And I like to remove the Graflex clamp from the upper shell instead of from the lower shell, because the grips that came with the Graflex Shop kit were actually a little bit longer, so it's actually butting up right up against the clamp. So to remove the clamp, I like to do it from the upper shell. So just push the clamp upwards, rotate it counterclockwise to unlock it, and then slide it out. When you put the clamp back on, make sure that you put it back such that it's in the A&H configuration. So you want the control box or the clamp clockwise from the red button. So when you remove the clamp, that reveals your crystal chamber chassis. We have our dual crystal chamber over here, pretty much underneath the J-lock section. We have a twist lock mechanism for the chassis connection up there. To remove the chassis, you want to make sure that you brace both the upper shell as well as the chassis, rotate it counterclockwise, and then you're going to feel or hear that click. So once that clicks, and you can rotate as far as you can now slide the chassis out. Here's your crystal chamber chassis. So the dual crystal chamber I designed in Fusion, got both of the brass ceiling and as well as the base sections. Designed in Fusion, I sent it off to CraftCloud to get it casted in brass. And then I had it weathered, or I weathered it with brass black as well as vinegar to age it up a bit. Throughout the rest of the crystal chamber, these are basically just threaded nuts, rods, as well as heat threaded inserts. We got aluminum standoffs there, and blue anodized aluminum. We got fins here, which I roughly designed in Fusion and had sent off to be printed in aluminum. And then we got copper tubing here, which is where the wires go through. On the chassis itself, we also have a soundboard cover as well as a battery holder cover. It's held on with, so there's a hinge mechanism there. Basically, it's just a brass rod going through to act as a hinge, and then it's also locked in with magnets. So there's 6 magnets, which actually makes it ridiculously strong. Snapped right in place. It's a little bit hard to actually remove. When removing the soundboard cover, I like to kind of dig my fingernails into this groove there. Just wedge it in there, and then you can remove the soundboard cover. For the battery side, there's actually kind of these holes here where I like to pinch it with my fingers, and then you can pull the battery cover off. There's the battery holder. We have the positive end over here, negative end over there. Let's see if I can remove the battery. Like so. Got the spring side as well as the positive side there. Got some detailing in there. And then when reinserting the battery, make sure I like to do negative side first, because my chassis does have this groove here. That helps to hold the battery in place a little bit better. So snap the battery in place, close the soundboard cover. On the sides, we also have two accent NeoPixel strips. Currently, they're styled as a battery indicator. And then at the edges, I also subbladed so that it shows the current blade color. Down here, where we have our 28mm bass speaker. Up here, we have our chassis connector PCB, as well as two switches there. So we have two onboard chassis switches. That way you can actually operate the saber without needing the chassis in the hilts. To the left here is the main button, and to the right here is the auxiliary button. In here, underneath the soundboard cover, we have our kill switch kind of hidden in there. Currently it's in the off position to the left. If you toggle to the right,
you better get on with your exercises.
It turns on. So there's also kind of power indicators. There's the open circuit sign, the closed circuit symbol. There we have our battery indicator. There and there. And then we also have two subbladed pixels to show the current blade color. So in order to insert the chassis into the hilts, make sure that the soundboard cover, or the front of the chassis, is roughly aligned with the glass eye, but then offset a little bit by rotating counterclockwise. So the way the mechanism works is that there's a kind of screw inside there, kind of latches onto this little groove there, and then there's these two kind of extrusions there to lock the chassis in place. So when inserting it, make sure that the soundboard cover is roughly lined up with the glass eye, and then rotate it counterclockwise a little bit. And you might need to play around with a little bit. But basically, once the chassis is inserted about here, wiggle a little bit. That way it kind of gets into that groove. And once it's in, you can kind of feel the poker pins making contact. So once it's fully seated, you want to rotate. Make sure you brace the upper shell as well as the chassis. Brace it and then rotate the chassis clockwise. And you're going to feel and hear that click. So once the chassis makes contact, you feel that click. Chassis is connected with the upper shell. And then put the lower shell as well as the Graflex clamp back on. Make sure you align it in the A New Hope configuration. So when looking at the red button, it's either clockwise if you look down the emitter and probably blow a hole into your head from the saber, or counterclockwise. With Empire Strikes Back, it's the other way around. Now that we have our saber reassembled, we want to loosen this slotted screw here. So this is basically the blade retention screw along with the bunny ears. So to loosen that, because it's a slotted screw, ideally you want to use a flathead screwdriver. So currently I just have flat tweezers. So you want to wedge it into that groove and then just loosen it counterclockwise. And then once you loosen that, you need to kind of clamp on the bunny ears to open it up, and then your blade plug should slide out. Now you can insert your blade. So again, make sure you clamp down on your bunny ears to give some room for the blade to slide in. And I'll line up the blade with the actual emitter and then slide it in. Make sure that's fully seated, and then you can tighten the blade retention screw back in. So on this saber, I configured swing on as well as twist off. We have our main button is the red switch. The auxiliary switch is this slide switch over here. So with this slide switch, you want to slide it down and then slide it back up to release. is a sail barge scene. It actually has a pretty long pre-on. And then the new type sound font for the 0079 Gundam. I have the blade styled in magenta, which is pretty much the color of the ARC-72's beam saber.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
And then back to the beginner font. So I'm sorry it took so long, but we're finally finished with this, and I'm really happy with how this came out. There were a lot of hurdles with this. It's a pretty daunting experience, but overall it's a pretty satisfying build now that we got it to where it is right now. So thank you so much for letting me work on this, and may the Force be with you.